Is narcissism being manufactured?
It's being catered to, is what it is. Like, narcissism is a normal phase to go through, but if your development is healthy, you'll grow out of it. You'll realize that there's other people, you'll be able to respect that they have a different experience, that it's not all about you. You just learn that. It's just a natural part of healthy development. If the conditions are not right, though, you get stuck in that narcissistic phase, and then you spend the rest of your life like that. A healthy culture would not reward that. They would say, sorry, you need to grow up. But in this culture, you become president of the United States or the head of a corporation. I'm not singling Trump out, by the way. He's not such a unique phenomenon. He's just happened to have attained a lot of fame and position. But this society, which bases itself on human nature as being greedy, selfish, individualistic, and aggressively competitive, it rewards narcissism.
Well,
So
that's what politicians are. I mean, we complain about them constantly.
politicians are corporate heads.
But we would never, you know, if you talk about these people who are running, let's say, in your constituency, and you'd say, well, I would never hire them for a job to work for me, but I will choose them to be the leader and the person who guides the community.
Yeah.
We're in a very weird state when people whom we wouldn't want to work for us in any capacity were choosing to lead us.
Well, not only that, would somebody who's chronically lying to you, makes promises and doesn't keep them, would they be your friends?
Not a chance.
But we make them. If I were to become abusive towards you right now in any way whatsoever, you'd have fear there for sure. You'd also have a whole dose of healthy anger that would say, stop it, get out of my space, get out of my face.
You know what? I could laugh. I was in my studio with a comedian who's well known. He started touching me inappropriately, and rather than say, stop, say no, say, leave me alone, I laughed. I was just laughing uncomfortably because I didn't want to escalate the situation, maybe. I didn't react in a way that I would have reacted had I seen him doing that.
Somebody else.
Another. Yes.
Well, how you acted in childhood, you disconnected from your healthy anger. Because what would have happened to you if you had been angry as a kid?
It wouldn't have been good.
What would have happened?
It probably would have made my situation worse.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that disconnection was actually your organism's way of supporting you. That disconnection was your organism's way of helping you survive. So that freeze response that you describe is actually self-protection in that situation. The trouble is that once we react that way, it gets wired in and becomes our default mode. So that even decades later, when you're completely powerful and you have every right and every capacity to say, stop it, you know, or worse, you don't. You have a given nervous laugh instead, you know, because to survive you had to freeze your anger, and so therefore when you need it, it's not available for you. And that's what that disconnection is all about. So initially that disconnect is protective. Later on that disconnect, of course, just makes you vulnerable or makes you, you know what, the predator, they always know.
Yeah.
They always know. They always know whose defense mechanisms have been disabled. Otherwise, you just would have punched the guy in the face, is what you would have done.
Oh, yeah.
Or you yelled at him, or you would have done something. You told him to get the hell out of your studio. And you, not only would you have done it, you would have filmed it and put it online.
I still have stuff I could put online from it. You're giving me ideas. Does everything go back to childhood? Can people experience a trauma at 16, 21, 29, 33 that will impact them so severely as an adult?
If you look at the studies on post-traumatic stress disorder, 100 soldiers go into battle, 20 come out with PTSD, 80 don't. Why not? The 20 that go home with PTSD are the people who were traumatized in childhood. And the adult experience simply triggers the old trauma. Even in concentration camp survivors, those that had safe, supportive early childhoods had a much better chance of coming out of it without significant trauma symptoms. I think it all goes back to childhood. I think that's when our brain is formed, that's when our personality is formed, that's when our fundamental beliefs about the world are formed, that's when we develop either positive or negative attitudes towards ourselves, towards our possibilities. I think it's all happens in the template of childhood. And later on, how we deal with adversity that comes on later on is very much conditioned by how we were first raised in the first place.
So somebody who's suffering, there's nowhere for me to turn. There's nothing I'm able to do. Help is expensive. They are lonely.
Well, the first thing I would say to them is, who's even talking that way? Mm-hmm. Like, which part of you is talking that way?
What parts are there that you would address in this situation? Like,
well, the part that's there is the part that cares about you. Otherwise, you wouldn't care about any of that stuff. So that there's a part of you that really cares about you.
That is, I think, something that people really need to... That's a perfect question to ask yourself in that moment.
Well, yeah, that's part of what I do. You know, and then I'd say, well, okay, so you can't afford a high-priced therapist. Can you afford to read a book from the library? Lots of great books out there. Can you go on YouTube and listen to people talk about finding yourself in trauma? Can you take a breath? Can you go on YouTube and find some breathing practices? Can you take a cold shower? Because taking a cold shower can make a huge difference to your nervous system. Can you take a walk? Can you look at a tree? Are there online groups that you could join where you could have useful conversations with people? I mean, there's a lot of stuff people can do.
So somebody will say, it won't work for me.
Then I'd say, who's saying that? Which part of you believes that it won't work for you? And yeah, I'm sure that you've had lots of disappointment, and but which part of you is convinced? Well, the part that is convinced that it won't work for you is the part that was hurt so badly in childhood that you saw no way out. And you're still seeing it through the eyes of that child.
Just one last question.
Sure.
So we often talk about our successes in society. We talk way too much about successes, I think.
Yeah.
So I try to get people to talk about their failures, because it seems as though it's an earthquake in your life. Mountains do not rise without earthquakes.
Yeah.
What was your failure?
The biggest failure was myself as a parent. I just wasn't nearly present enough for my kids' childhood as a empathetic and sort of emotionally stable human being. And that's had an impact. I also learned a lot, but I learned it at their expense. But still, that learning happened through a particular trajectory that, if I could do it again, I'd do it differently. Which, by the way, most parents would.
Most people say that about almost anything they did in your life. Well, thank you for being so open about that, so gracious with your time. And the myth of normal trauma, illness, and healing in a toxic culture is, I think that is when we talk about when a person is at that point where they say, I can't, I don't know how to keep going. I think that's a good place to start.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure. It's been nice to talk with you.
Dr. Gabor.